Yeah, baby. Yeah, baby.
Oh man, sorry guys, we're running late. We had some sweet technical difficulties. Steve is sliding in by the
Oh,
skin of his teeth.
both of us. No, we're both sliding in on sliding on concrete on our faces to this.
That's true.
Yeah.
Everybody who has a car that still works, raise your hand. Not so fast, Joe Gamble.
Would you like to share?
uh, yeah, I would. I did. I had to Uber this evening.
Do tell.
And guys, I'm sure y'all are sharing libation details. Yeah, look at this. You guys are
Your
getting
curly
drink
fries
on.
to reduce inflammation.
I'm drinking cold brew caffeine because I didn't sleep last night, and I gotta go to the airport when we're done with this, and I cannot be stewed while I'm driving. Let's see, what do we got here?
Well, I'll make up for it, no doubt.
Oh, yeah, please do. We can be like the scales, and you go completely that way, and I'll go the other.
Oh, you want to talk about that way, completely that way? All right.
Just go for it, Steve.
All
Go,
right.
go.
I've got.
Um.
I got an iced double tall latte.
Oh well, okay. We're brothers.
I have sparkling water.
Okay.
I have.
You're joshing me now. You got to have some firepower.
I'm not. I'm all spread out here. I've got everything for every mood covered for every segment of the show tonight because we're going to cover a lot of ground, and I'm going to cover a lot of ground.
You're going to cover all the ground.
Yeah, you bet, baby. I
wish I could.
Look what I found today.
Oh, that looks fun. Tell me about this because I don't know what I'm looking at.
Fortaleza tequila. This is tequila blanco.
So what's special and happy about that one?
It comes in a bottle for one thing.
Hey, and I'm not allowed to say expression anymore. You told me.
I'm sorry.
I'm not allowed to say expression anymore.
It's stone ground. Here's how you express yourself with this. You start out with a shot.
Okay.
Cheers, fellow malcontents.
Oh, you did a real shot. Okay. See, now I'm feeling
I want to see if it. I've never tried this before. I saw it on the shelf today, and I liked it just for the label. Okay, I did a little Google, and it had a lot of stars, and I went, okay, can't really go wrong. And if I do, who gives a rat's ass?
It's tequila.
So I figured, well, I'm really going to give it the test. So it passed the shot test.
Okay.
You know when you do a shot of Cuervo, it just goes down and down your spinal cord and makes your hand shake, and it has that nasty sort of snaky bite to it. It's horrible. This does not do that. I got Blanco ostensibly to make margaritas with. You use a Blanco. You don't use a finely aged tequila to make a margarita.
Right.
So I wanted to see how it was just shooting it. And I can now report, yeah, baby, slides right down.
Okay.
And none of the nasties, but it's got that little bite that lets you know that it's the thing is there. But it's not like, oh, I wish I hadn't done that kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'll do that again, which may or may not be a good thing.
Woo!
Okay, the next test is the flute test.
Do you have more of it in there?
What? What did I do? What did I say?
You're just doing it.
So
I admire
not much on the nose.
Okay.
Not exactly. Not exactly sipping tequila.
Hmm.
It's not sipping tequila, but so far, um, good for good for shots. So with a slice of lime and salt on the hand, blah blah blah, perfect for that. Sipping, not so much.
Okay.
Now let's
Well,
try the margarita test.
I want to be
It's a
like you.
lovely margarita. This is the Fortaleza tequila with curacao
Okay.
and a little bit of either brown sugar or maple syrup. I'm not sure which. I think we're out of maple syrup, so it might be brown sugar. Anyway,
Ooh. Usually,
that's really nice, although it's a little light. And I know the reason it's light is because the margarita fairy doesn't want me to get hammered during the show too soon. And to that I say,
you're not
it didn't
listening.
pass the flute test, so waste not, want not. Oh, here's a little pan
My
I had laying around. This, and you got to use whatever pan you have laying around for that, because
bad.
you
Guys,
just
get
do.
ready. This is going to be a good show.
You just do. You use the right tool for the job, my friend. And oh yeah, hell of a lot better. That's so.
Okay. Started off on
I
the
have
right foot.
spent so much time and energy and thought and getting technical advice to get things working here so that I can explain things or demonstrate things clearly through the stream that you wouldn't normally hear elsewhere. And it seems like every time I come up with a new thing to uh, to demonstrate, the rig doesn't cooperate. Over a course of a couple of weeks or so, it just doesn't cooperate. It's somehow it didn't remember the preset or the work the the preset that I saved for it. So I should be able to just load the workspace and it should all come back the way it was, and it
Yeah.
never does. And
This
I
is
don't
why we're
remember.
late. This is why we're late because of
I'm all over the map all during the 2-week period between shows. So by the time I come back here, I don't have a clue how this stuff works, and I don't have time to wrap my head around it. So, like,
you're
yeah,
like, where's the on button?
yeah, exactly. So, uh, um, what I was going to try to do, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to pull off anyway. So it's no big loss, but man, it's frustrating sometimes. Um, and Joe, you've been bouncing off the walls every day in the past 2 weeks. I know. I don't know what's going on in your life. I just know that you're like bouncing off the walls on a daily basis. So I hope you're doing okay, my friend. Because
Thank you. Thank you.
I love you, and I don't want you to be like
Dead.
overwhelmed with life. But
Well, I am.
sometimes we get overwhelmed with life,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm here to tell you, get over.
I'm here to tell you, shut the fuck up.
Yeah,
Get on
dude.
with it. Actually, you know what? That's what a great friend says. Actually,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Hey, do you want to? We can talk about this, but do you want to jump in this with this? Boop.
Maybe in a minute. Let's
Okay.
see what's uh, been amazing. Well, the whole thing. I wasn't really just trying to show off. It's like right after the last episode. Actually, the day of the last episode, I got my booster shot and my flu shot.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So by the end of the show, I was starting to get a little bit of the chills and a little bit of reaction to those. And by the time I went to bed, I had 4 or 5 covers over me. I'm shaking like a leaf.
Ugh.
The next morning, it was okay. I just kind of laid back and didn't really have much energy, but no problem. Um, but one of the things that the the pharmacist recommended when I get the shot was to stay hydrated. And
With?
damn it, I'm gonna stay hydrated. Let me tell you, I'm gonna hydrate every way and place that I can.
Oh, Steve.
Hey, man, I got to have it together. I got to have energy. I got to stay on top of my shit. I got to have fun. And I got to make sure that I properly represent this tequila so our friends out there know that it's safe territory, right?
Yeah. And I also appreciate that you're not, hyping it as something that it's not. It's not a sipping
No,
tequila.
it's nice. It's nice. I have
It's a cocktail tequila.
the Margarita Fairy just warned me that she had already made it stronger than normal, and
Oh man, we're in trouble. We better get the tech talk out of the way early on.
I don't know that that's true. I think it's as strong as it needs to be.
Yeah, but you dumped
And
the flute in there.
like we say, what's one more gonna do?
Turns out
Uh,
it does have an effect.
what a
I've tried
what a 2-week period, guys.
it.
Thank y'all for being here. Happy to see you. Happy to see our gang. Happy you are like overcoming your speed bumps to be here, Joe. Because
Oh, thank you.
this won't happen without you. You know that. And because
Well, I
I
love
would
being
be,
here.
I would be exploring naval lint if you weren't around. And
Well, hey, you know what? Even with all the garbage that I have going on, it's really not that bad when I think about, what's going on with some other folks. So
Mm.
I am not going to complain. I'm looking at over what everybody else has been saying here so far. Oh yes, Corey Vrecken, my man. Um,
Pre-prohibition rye. What's that?
uh, uh, a rye whiskey done to specifications pre-prohibition. I'm
Oh, it wasn't one of
assuming.
those things that there was some guy I saw on the news that some guy had found a couple of hundred bottles of Civil War era whiskey in the under the foundation of his house when they were
Yeah,
rebuilding the foundation. It's
but
not that.
I've always heard that spirits that are that old are actually, I mean, it's
They're
not
really spirits.
drinking. Yeah,
They're not for drinking. They're just spirits.
yeah, they're just spirits.
There to let you know that there are really spirits.
Yeah, and I have had enough scotch that's 30 plus years old to know that, like, when I was first learning about that stuff, I thought the older the better. It's like the same crap in guitar world. Like, oh, if it's vintage, it's the best. But I've found with whiskeys and guys in the peanut gallery, I mean, I guess it's a taste thing. I'm not saying that this is a rule, but to me, like, I don't know, 12 to 18 years tends to be the sweet spot. When you get up over 20 years, you tend to taste more of the cask than the actual spirit itself. The cask kind of starts to dominate the stuff. So, I've had 32-year-old Lafroig and I don't know, I think 25-year-old Ardbeg and some others, and it's good to taste. To get it in your database in your head for what that tastes like, but it's not my favorite thing, and it's certainly not worth the bread.
Mm.
Modern Vintage, thanks for the shout about that 7-string demo. That was fun.
That
I love that amplifier.
and Modern Vintage, we have your question up here so that we don't forget to answer it. We'll get to that in a little bit. And thanks for bringing it up. But I need a few minutes to get
Get all
the crankshaft greased and
you're getting souped up on moonshine.
oh man. After the last show, I actually went out and looked up the lyrics to Chuggalug, by Roger Miller. What a songwriter! What a hysterical song that is when you read the lyrics and the way he phrases it. His phrasing is literally like a drunk guy talking.
Yeah,
He rolls all the sentences together. There's a song structure, but his phrasing, one line rolls over into the next line the same way a drunk who's rambling talks.
Yeah.
And he finishes the first sentence in the next line of the next sentence, but playing rhythm guitar spot on the whole time.
Yeah.
There was this Tony. No. One of the Rat Pack guys, the tall, handsome Italian guy. I should know his name like the back of my hand.
I'm always at a loss for that
With
stuff.
the deep voice. Come on, help me out, guys.
Who all was in the Rat Pack?
Oh, it was Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr.
I see the face.
Dino, yes.
Yeah.
Dino. Dean. Dino is his last name. Dean Martin. Thank you. No, Dean Martin. Yeah, Dean Martin.
Yeah, Dean Martin.
Didn't he do Volare? He did a great drunk on stage. He wasn't. Everybody thinks that
he wasn't, right? That was his whole thing. He'd walk around acting like he was sloshed.
Yeah. He did this thing where he'd like walk up to the mic with a shot, and he would go like this with the shot, like he's going to drink it and miss, and it would go over his shoulder, and then he would take a drag off his cigarette, but he would miss and then flick it out into the audience, and he was just like, people thought, oh man, he's messed up, and he was just like, that was his shtick. He's good at that.
Yeah.
But I loved those guys. It's really funny. Those guys weren't really that hard of drinkers, and there was another guy that on that original Friars Roast, there was a couple comedians whose shtick was a drunk dude, and they would laugh and act like they were hammered and stuff, and they pretty much basically telegraphed to the whole country that stay drunk all the time. We do. They probably committed to alcohol, like sort of fostered alcoholism in this country more than anybody else, just like goofing on it, it was pretty funny.
Right.
But
kind of playing up, that they're doing more than they are because they're actually on stage. Because if you're human, you actually can't
possibly
consume that much alcohol and hold it together. I don't care who
you'd be in the back of a truck really quick.
Yeah.
That video that you did was, what Joe does is he doesn't sound like anybody. He doesn't play like anybody. Even when he tries to, he doesn't. And so when he makes videos, he's coming from he's coming from Gamblesville, and you hear things and see things that you don't normally see in any demo videos. On top of that, your level of playing on each different part is distinctly different, so on that last thing that you did for the Deliverance with the 7-string, it's like I wanted that big deep chunky thing because I wanted people to hear the Deliverance do that big drop tuning chunky thing. I wanted it to go gang, 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 gang. I wanted that. I told Joe, give me that. Do whatever else you want, as long as it's got some gang, gang, gang. I want people to hear that because that's what people ask us. Does it do this? Like, yeah, of course it does that. Well, show me. Really? You don't know by now, but okay. So, Joe, people out there that haven't seen 8 million people play Junka 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 on our amplifiers want to see the new one do that. Like, it's the new Deliverance, it's the Deliverance 2. And since the Deliverance 1, we've forgotten all about how to do chunk in the Deliverance 2. You know, it's like, come on, seriously? But such is the world we live in, right? Okay, so Joe, give it to me. And what does he do? He makes it sound literally like a freight train coming down a track with this rhythmic thing that you're doing. And then you play this totally not, and I'm only saying it this way so people sort of get what I'm talking about. It's not really what I think of it, but you lay a Satriani style melody on top of it, but it's not a throwaway cheesy copy of a Satriani melody line. It's a great melody figure that you came up with, that it's almost like, God, I wish Satriani would do something like that these days. He doesn't do anything like that anymore. And you did it. You put this really classic screaming, upper mid-range, almost cocked-wah kind of vibe, sort of like he does, only you didn't have that really tube screamer cocked-wah vibe thing.
But not
right up to the edge of it without copying that. But as a result, it has a broader palette, and it sits on top of that chunky rhythm thing really nicely. And when I heard that, I thought, oh yeah, this is it. And and we released 2 versions of it. The version I wanted, and then the version Joe really actually created. And the reason we did the version I wanted first is because the rhythm track is so killer on it. I wanted people to really focus on that and hear that, because it's just monstrous. Dun, 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 dun. Just the whole rhythm of it. When I heard it, I was in my chair like this.
And you're like, get that lead crap out of there.
I'm getting, dude, we know that you can play it in your sleep behind your head. That's you did this really amazing riff going up to that, and I said, let's just hear that. And I could just hear it. I could just hear you on stage just laying down that rhythmic groove and just stripping all the other stuff off of it and just watching people literally smack their heads on the edge of the stage. That's the vision I had while I was like, Joe, yeah, I know that you could, yeah, I know. But when I hear that, I literally want to jump off stage and do a mosh pit. I just totally want to dive in. And yeah, so that's why there's 2 versions of it, because I really wanted that.
Well, I remember
to get hammered home.
Yeah, so I sent it over to Steve. Hey, what do you think? And he said, well, it's great, but can we just have? Basically, it was when that B section comes up when you're soloing, can you not have the soloing there? And I'm used to getting notes all the time because I do for other people. A big part of getting notes is when somebody says something that just sounds outrageous, you have to sit there for a minute and go, okay, before I have my knee-jerk moment, like, just sit with it. And I think Steve, we're on the phone, and I was just quiet for about 10 seconds, like, what the fuck? And then I thought, no, wait. And then you were backtracking, like, no, if that's a bad idea, let's not do it. I'm not, no. I think I know how to do it now. And it totally made sense. And I think I remember saying to you, yeah, because it's not a Joe Gamble guitar demo.
Yeah.
The Deliverance amplifier. Yeah. So we want to hear the amplifier do that thing. So
there's a question here I want you to answer, but before that, Wayne Tone Sinker Anderson, thank you. Appreciate the sentiment. Understand totally. We have wives and kids and things around, and we totally understand where you're coming from. And if all of us lonely critters have to sit around and geek out about shit without you. We'll have you in our hearts while we're doing it. But I really appreciate the sentiment. Thanks a lot. That was awesome. And again, Modern Vintage, we're not going to dismiss your question. We'll get back to that in a sec. What I want to know, I want you to answer this question.
Oh, that's easy, guys. It's standard tuning, and then what would be the low B string on the 7th string, I just dropped it down a whole step. So it's
To
like
a C.
drop A, down
Oh,
to
A.
yeah. So
Oh yeah, A is before B.
I like to call it down to
Actually,
Z
C would be up a step, so that's how much I'm paying attention.
So yeah, I love that tuning. Like drop A on a 7th string, and no flubby in that amplifier, folks. And you know what, I'll say this while we've been talking about it. Even in those rhythm tracks, I dialed in more mid range, I think, than a lot of guys would. And
Because
man,
you
I really
can.
like that tone. Oh yeah, it was really nice. What are the pickups in that guitar? They are bare knuckle juggernauts. I know that's not what came stock in the guitar, but when I picked up the guitar, that's what was in there. I think those are actually like Misha from Periphery. I think those are one of his like signature pickups or something. But they're cool. They work in that guitar. Um, and let's see what else. I think. And then by the way, while we're on here, Steve, I have another Deliverance video that I was supposed to have to you a couple days ago, and I've had to reshoot it 4 times.
Yeah, I'm getting used to that.
God, the lens and the autofocus. I need a new camera now, but I finally got it to work for this video, and when we're done tonight, I can play you a basic cut of it while we're on StreamYard.
Yeah, you know, and it actually makes total sense that you did it that way because, I mean, how can you get it more chunky? Carve out a little mid range, and then it'll go, you know, and then you'll have that. We already know it can do that. I don't think anybody has ever heard a Deliverance do what you did with it,
Oh,
and
thank you.
that's like powerful, rhythmic, classic rock, and chunk all in the same sound. That was just like, yeah, baby. Yeah, baby. That's really what it's about. You ought
Love
to
that.
be able to you ought to be able to just like see I'm that's my that's my long time career long time pet peeve is that getting pigeonholed into a particular sort of
Right.
paradigm, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's never been about that. It never will be about that. It's not about that now. And uh, the message in all that is go out and do what you will with it. Make it yours. Make it yours. You don't have to just do blah because somebody else did blah. You go out and make it yours. Just turn the
Yeah.
knob a little bit. Do
Yeah.
a little of this, a little of that, and and if you really do want to emulate what something that you really like that somebody else does, you can do that too. But we're not our demos just really aren't going to be about that because it's I guess what we're doing is we're taking it for granted that yeah, you can do that and that and that with it.
Yeah.
And but what else can you do? Well, and that's where the imagination takes place. Um
Well, thank you for building that damn amp.
well, you just did a great job with it. Somebody did a really cool um video recently. An owner of a guy that bought the Series 2, I think the 60, the D60,
Yeah.
and liked it so much that he went out and bought the original Deliverance version, the version 1,
Series
because
1.
he'd
Okay.
heard so much about it. He wanted to know for sure what was the difference. He just like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
a Deliverance guy now. I'm
Oh,
gonna go get an old one, and he A B'd them,
Yeah.
And I'll be damned if he didn't exactly nail what the changes were, which is what we've said. They're subtle. There's just a little layer of sheen
They're
coming
so
out of it.
very real. I think I played them at the shop back to back about a year ago now. I think it was in December last year. And I had kind of embarrassed. I had never played a Deliverance before. And you had me play through the series 1 first. And I was just like, wow, this thing is fantastic. And then you had me play through the series 2, and I was going, uh-oh, but this is the one that I really want. But I thought, that you know how we all are. It's like, yeah, but I could see having them both. Like we always do.
Well, you did what everybody that's familiar with the amp did too, which was
Mhm.
we had a couple of guys that have been using Deliverance for a long time go,
Huh?
yeah, I really love that. I really love that. And plug in a new one. And I'm like going, yeah, wow, I really like that new thing that it's doing. But there's the low end is like, oh, that's right. The depth control has a little bit more. It's more active than it was before. So at 10 o'clock, there's less depth sound on the new one than the old one. So if you set the new one at 12 o'clock or a little more, then it's more like the old one at 10 o'clock. And so I just went 12 o'clock. He goes, oh, okay, we're all done. All right, give me the new one. Fuck.
Uh,
And the, that's the thing that I keep being reminded that people do is the mindset of where the knobs are supposed to be set.
right, right. And I wish I had known the amp better now, thinking about doing that back to back. Because now I
Probably,
actually know, okay, wait a minute, let's
maybe so, but see, I've never been married to that dogma. I'm not married to any dogma.
well, but remember when the first Deliverance demo that I did, and you were just laughing at my settings?
Oh yeah, yeah, the bass
You're
is
like,
way off.
you're looking at it and going, "That's stupid, Joe." But then you're listening to it and you're like, "Actually, that sounds really
It
good."
sounds great. It's stupid, but it sounds great.
You made it sound really good.
But see, isn't that the whole idea of it? Is like you make it your
Yeah,
own.
you
You do
just
what you do with it. It's just like, no, you have to set this here and that there. Otherwise, you can't. And there are and we'll talk about this tonight. There are amplifiers where you have to set it. You have to follow the dogma. You have to do it the right way because and the great thing about you not being familiar with it was it's like you weren't tied to that, so it was great. And
yeah.
that's what we find. Uh, there are tolerances in pots. There are differences in gain from tube to tube to tube to tube, and
Mhm, mhm.
difference in behavior from a batch of KDH to another batch of KDH. There's all these subtle behaviors that have literally hit a 10 to 20% tolerance, which is really a lot when you think about
Yes.
it.
Well, that is a lot.
So the idea that 10 and 10 and 12 and 2 and 1 is the formula, and if you don't adhere to the formula, you're an idiot, is so antithetical to what we do that it makes
Yeah.
me crazy.
And you know what? Now that I think about it, I remember exactly what we were talking about, and I'm going to have to cop to a little bit of doing that on that first video. And what you were commenting on was, Joe, you rolled off all of the bass, and I'm like, yeah, I'm used to doing that to get the lead stuff to cut. Like I've been doing that forever, you know.
Because in some amps, you need to do that to get it to.
Yeah, because the amps that I've traditionally used, like that's kind of okay. Like in that video that we're talking about, I was really goosing the power section. And
Hmm.
I know from my adventures with non-master Marshalls and stuff, the full right-hand sweep, and then you just get rid of the bass, and then ta-da, there's your sound. And
Hmm.
so I was kind of coming at it from that direction.
Hmm.
And then we had that discussion, and I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'm not going to be afraid to use that bass knob. And everything that you'll see me doing now with that amp, like there's judicious usage
Hmm.
of bass frequencies now, and it all holds together on that damn amplifier. So
here's a quickie from Shane. I want to get out of the way. E34Ls. I think JJ still makes the E34L. In the past, JJ was Tesla, and the original E34Ls came out under the Tesla brand. The reason they were called E34L and not EL34 is because they behave differently than an EL34, and they made those too. So they made an E34L to differentiate the behavior and performance between the standard tube and the one that operated differently. The one that operated differently was, if I recall correctly, specified by Groove Tubes to be, we wanted a little more of this, a little more of that, blah, 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 blah. And it was kind of random. And it tended to bark in the mid-range a little more. We used them for a while because there was a period of time in the late 90s that the original Tesla factory was, the rumor is they were bombed out of existence. We don't know if it means the factory itself was actually bombed or just the access to it, the region that it was in was under a lot of strife, and it wasn't able to operate. When I don't know the exact details, but I do know that they had to shut down and either relocate or become part of a different country, or blah, 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 and it eventually became JJ and all of that. So E34Ls they were really solid, reliable tubes. I never really liked the sound of them, but there was a period of time there in the late 90s where you didn't really have a lot of choice. So it was either get the really junky ones and just fly with it, because they were less expensive and they were readily available. And if one failed, you just sent the customer another one, or you use this one that may have been compromised a little bit sonically, but it was ultimately more reliable. And so we went for the more reliable expression of it. On the basis of just performance and reliability. So, and then once later on in the early 2000s, they became EL34s, reliable, nice sounding EL34s became much more readily available from a variety of different suppliers. Then we could pick and choose and be really picky again. And once we heard the Mullard EL34 reissue, we went, okay, game over. When they first came out, just like any new tube, when they first come out, little bit of buggy stuff going on. We had some fail in production, blah, blah, blah. We figured, well, we'll give it 6 months and see how it goes. And we have a long time relationship with the supplier, a new sensor who produces the Tungsol, the Electro-Harmonics, the Sobtech, all of those, Mullard. And yeah, we'll give them a run. Why? Because we liked the sound of them. We knew that the equipment that they were made on was actually supposedly equipment that was transferred from East Germany, where the original RFT tubes were made, to Russia, where all the other the Expopol factory, where all the other Russian tubes were manufactured. They supposedly bought that tooling and transferred it, shipped it to Russia, and make those Mullard reissues using those. They also make the EL34s, which are very similar in construction, but there's just something about the Mullards. They just have a nicer sound overall, and I love the idea of the Mullard logo on them. Yeah. So we went for that for those two reasons. Just like I liked them overall. They had a more balanced sound, and I really liked the fact that it had the Mullard logo. I thought it accentuated our brand better, and our brand was better represented by having them in there. So That's what we did. So that takes care of that. Shane, thank you for that question. Is there anybody out there hearing echo? I'm hearing a lot of echo, even though I've got echo cancellation on.
I'm not.
Okay, good. Then
maybe fine. It's that tequila.
Maybe. I've just been having such issues with buggy gear today.
Yes, you have. Me too. Just so
You know,
Well,
what makes pots that are tighter than 20? Who makes pots that are tighter than 20%? Who makes? You guys are really paying attention to this shit, aren't you? Who makes pots that are tighter than 20% anyway? Most pot manufacturers do. In the past, wasn't so much. CTS was notorious for calling out 10 to 20% tolerance and being 30, 40. CTS, American made pots, you know, they were the worst in terms of tolerance. When CTS transferred all their tooling to Taiwan and started laser trimming their pots, then their 20% pots were typically 10.
okay.
So there's that. The idea that this whole the thing about Ed's Plexi had 50K instead of 25K, no, they were 25K pots, probably with a high tolerance. Maybe it was an old pot, maybe it was a defective. Who knows?
I remember
I had one of Ed's amps in my shop. He brought it in saying that the transformer is getting weak. The most ludicrous thing that a tech can tell somebody that really knows how transformers are made can say is, I think the transformer is getting worn out or weak or blah, blah, blah. They're not magnetic. They're not like a pickup. The magnetic strength doesn't weaken. If anything, no.
Interesting.
Thanks, BMO. Let me just check here and see if I got echo cancellation set on. I don't know what the hell's going on there. Old gear. But I had the amp there, and when Matt Bruck, who was Matt's tech for the longest, or Ed's tech for the longest time, and a longtime friend of mine, said that needed to be looked at, and I went all through that amp from top to bottom. That stock amp,
the number one,
didn't have any of the mods or any of the voodoo going on that people claimed for it. It was just like any other. Really, I'm sorry to burst you guys' bubble, but it was just like any other JMP around that era that I've seen. And we've got a little tidbit about that later on we'll get into as well. But no. At the end of the day, I'm sorry, everybody's just going to have to suck it up and go. Ed was that good of a guitar player and that unique sounding, and there isn't a special magic amp that made it that way. Sorry. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But
I remember when
life. That's life.
When my friend Bob, actually, who made these two amps, he was the one who showed me, okay, here's how you get the Ed sound, which that's how you do it, and then do that. Did he? What's that?
Did he say what effect that had? That would be my question.
No, he just, we were sitting there with his old Marshalls, and he's like, "Here, this is how you do it," because he really goes after that thing. And
I'm gonna answer this one just because I'm in that mood.
Oh yeah.
You just pitch them at me as hard and fast as you can because I'm ready for you motherfuckers tonight. My thoughts are, I do not relish speaking ill of those who have passed on, so I will not do that. Let's just suffice to say that the person in question was an amp repair guy in the Valley that did repairs like everybody else does repairs. He did some good ones. He did some bad ones. I've seen some just because when I worked at Valley Arts, I was virtually down, a mile away from his shop, and I knew the kind of work that he was doing. And the people that came to Valley Arts came to us because we had a reputation for the work that we did. And sometimes we got stuff from customers that went there and brought it to us to get it corrected or done right or done again sooner than it might have needed to be. There wasn't.
That was the era of here's my new mod. Oh
He
shit, I
was a
don't like
he
that.
was
Let's
a
make it
guy.
to
He
take it
was a
out.
guy that was available to go on tour with Ed and knew some basic stuff. He knew how to fix amps. He sort of knew how to tweak things and did some interesting mods. Some of them were horrendous. Some of them were basic and simple. The ones that were the more simple to execute ones were the ones that most people talk about these days.
Yeah,
The
what's
ones
the
that really
cool
didn't
mod?
impact the amp that much. The ones that people said, "Oh, this guy's really doing these really bizarre mods, and they're really interesting, and he's really technically advanced." They were nightmares inside,
Mm.
and no sane person would do in an amplifier what some of those things were doing. But that was kind of like that era. There was all kinds of crazy stuff going on at that time. Uh, so it was just kind of like the time period that that whole thing is a thing of its time, and when you understand the context of what was going on at that time, then all the other stuff starts to fall into place. But really, it was just a guy that would be able to go on the road uh, with Ed and replace tubes and buy his stuff and just be, a typical guy keeping gear, working on the road. And when you're out on the road beating the shit out of old amps every night, you have backups. You have a tech that can fix things and retube things and rebias things on the fly, and that's just what you have. There aren't perfect magic amps out there that this is the one that I use for everything. That's just ridiculous. And that isn't the way it is. So, uh, it's what you want to believe, really. A lot of it is hype. Ed said a lot of things that weren't accurate about his gear, about the the famous episode with the Variac. I turned it up. No, you didn't. You turned it down, and people just ate that stuff up, and it got just like in the press, in the music press, like anything, got regurgitated and repeated and repeated, and now it's a historical sort of mythical thing. That's what happened.
So I have to claim ignorance here. What was the difference between, like, say, what Lee Jackson was doing versus what the cool Jose mods were versus what Harry Colby was doing? Like, do you remember what was on the menu for what these guys were doing? Was it that different?
I didn't see Colby stuff.
Okay.
Lee Jackson was doing to Marshalls what Paul Rivera did to Deluxes.
Okay.
Rivera developed a bunch of mods in cooperation with a session guy named Jay Graydon.
Oh yeah.
And Graydon was coming up to him going, "I need more mids. I need this. I need that."
Mhm.
And so he was kind of Paul's muse and would drive Paul to figure out how to get to do what
So
Jay
more mids,
wanted.
more mids, more mids. How different was what Paul was doing from what Randy was doing up north
That was
with old
it
fenders?
was it was pretty much all kind of flowing in the same direction. More gain, more mids,
Yeah,
more
yeah.
cut,
Mhm.
more sustain. And um so Paul developed a series of mods. He had stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, and what that meant was for $100 you could get stage 1, which was just a simple gain bump, and stage 2 was a gain bump and then something else, and stage 3 was a 5-position fat switch and stage
But these games,
included in that, and so it was like a hamburger. There's the plain hamburger, and then there's a cheeseburger, and then there's the double cheeseburger, and then there's the double cheese double burger, and that's what those were. And
when did extra tubes get introduced? Like what version was that?
say what?
Like a, there's an extra tube in here now in your amplifier. Was
I
that part of the menu?
No, I think the extra tube. Actually, you put an extra tube in when you put an effects loop in it.
Oh, okay. All right. So that
So,
wasn't a part of
yeah,
the
and that was something that started after Paul left Valley Arts. That started when I started working at Valley Arts, developing the effects loop thing. And everybody was sort of developing ideas about what an effects loop was. And Mesa was going through all of that and trying to figure out what's a good effects loop and where should we put it and blah blah blah. And they kind of missed the boat on that. They didn't exactly do. I don't think they ever did a really great effects loop. But um, that was all transpiring between 79, 80 to 85, really refining what the effects loop how it should behave and where it should be placed in the circuit and all that. So Lee Jackson worked for Rivera and learned all of Rivera's mods. And then when he split off and started his own thing, Lee Jackson amps, he did Lee Jackson mods. He opened a repair shop and he was doing mods, and he basically did the whole Rivera Stage 4 mod to a Marshall. Beef up the power supply, add an effects loop, put an additional gain stage in, and the 5-position fat switch. That was sort of like on the menu. So Rivera did a couple of those on Marshalls, a few of them, but mostly he did them on little amps because the clientele at Valley Arts were the session guys that were like,
right.
The Beach Boys at noon, Sonny and Cher at 2, Burt Bacharach at 4, the Mannix.
It wasn't the hard rock leaning guys yet. That wasn't Paul.
They were the Steely Dan, the singer songwriter sessions, movie soundtracks, TV jingles. They were doing every kind of playing.
Yeah.
And Tommy Tedesco, every kind of playing. He'd come in and he'd bring in a balalaika to play it. I'm sorry?
Who did Steve Lukather's Deluxe? That amp.
That was Rivera.
That was a Rivera. Okay.
Yeah. And he did a bunch of those. And he didn't like the idea of me doing his mods. I'm sure he didn't like the idea of Lee Jackson doing his mods either. And I only say that because he called me up and said, "Hey, make up your own mods." And I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know you were sensitive about it. Okay, I'll do that." And I did. But I kind of tired of it after a while because it was just like, well, it turned out to be something that somebody wanted really badly. And then once they sort of wrapped their head around what they gained versus what they lost in getting that mod, they were starting to pine for the pre-modded version of the amp. And can you make it so you can switch it back to stock? And like, oh man. Okay, so what you really want now is an amp that has 2 channels, one that's the stock channel and one that's modified. And that's kind of how it played out, and that's what eventually led me to, it's just not going to happen in these stock amps. It's really going to take a fresh platform. I tried it in Deluxes, I tried it in Marshalls, I tried it in High Watts, and at the end of the day, it was just like, nah, we need a. I don't want to get too far off in the weeds on that, because it's a big rabbit hole. But that's really what drove me out of there, because it was like, oh, enough of this already,
That's interesting.
And the whole Valley Arts thing was changing. The personality of the store was changing, and the market was changing. Guitar Center was growing and sort of really impinging on their core business, and then they didn't really have a great long-term lease, so that when their lease expired, they didn't have an option to sign a new lease at the same or near the same price. And the landlord doubled the price when the lease expired. You go, okay, here's the new price of your lease, and it was double. And they went, ah! And it was a huge store. So, but they didn't want to move the location, so they cut the store in half. So they basically paid the same amount for half of the size of the store. And to be honest, there was a lot of dead space in that store, in the back and upstairs. There was just a lot of dead space that wasn't really being utilized. So it actually didn't hurt them to shrink the size of the store, but and then they started getting into doing the manufacturing, so. But the store was profitable enough that the store was sort of supporting the manufacturing. But anyway, there was sort of a writing on the wall thing kind of going on, and this other shop offered me a job where basically, we like your work, We know you have a clientele, a reputation. So here's what we'll give you. We'll give you a good commission structure, and you can do whatever the hell you want. We'll give you the keys to the shop. You can come and go whenever you please. And so, yeah, I could go tour. I could go do local gigs, stay up all night, and then come to work at noon, or I could come to work at 9 o'clock at night and work until 8 o'clock in the morning or something like
Your
that.
time.
I could go in there whenever I wanted to get work done for them and then get out. So I called my own hours, and it was really great because it gave me a lot of freedom to do all kinds of different things. It was also a great place for me to go try out prototypes and things like that late at night, where I could bang on stuff for hours and hours and hours and not drive the other techs in the building crazy with it, because it was constant. Just, reefing on an open E chord for 2 straight hours and tweaking the harmonics. It's a little bright. The mid needs to, the bass now is,
Yeah.
it was that kind of thing where it would just literally drive people up the wall if I tried to do that during business hours. So that was really a cool thing.
So should we rewind actually a little bit back to the Valley Arts days and get in on the 2CP?
Which was the good news is everything that's transpiring with that project is rolling out just the way I kind of anticipated that it would. And
let's tell everybody what the hell we're talking about, just to bring them up.
So on November 10th, the 2CP, the Synergy 2CP module was released officially, and I'd worked on that. I designed it. And the 2CP is the Mark IIc Plus module. And my participation in Valley Arts basically set me up for being able to do a project like that, because I was there during the transition from the Mark I to the Mark IIa and B and ultimately the C, and I was gone. I was gone from Valley Arts before the 3 came on the scene. So I was in that window where they transitioned from the 1 to the 2 series. And there's a whole video on that where I explain that in detail. So we won't go down that road. It's there for everybody to see, and probably a lot of people have already seen it, which is great. So after the Ultra Lead came out, and I already had like a platform and a topology,
there's that sucker
to do the EQ. When I did the Ultra Lead and the Deliverance, I realized I needed to have a different pot than they were using in order to accomplish certain things. The reason that they have all their modules have the pots diagonally arranged across the panel is because they're fairly large pots, and in order to get them in that physical space, they needed to be arranged diagonally. And when I started working on our modules, I've started realizing I need real estate on that front panel board. I need more real estate than is available using those pots. And so I spec'd out a smaller pot. It's actually every bit as accurate and high quality as the ones that they use in there, but they're physically smaller so that they could be ranged vertically across the panel rather than diagonally across the panel. And that gives me, when you diagonally arrange pots there, that wastes real estate on the PCB that you could use for parts. And so I just went, that's like having handcuffs on me, man. I can't deal with that. I need to use these other kinds of pots. I proposed the pots, and they were like, oh, no. All the modules are made with these pots that we use, and we bought thousands of them, so you're going to use those. And not wanting to start World War III, I just went, okay, it's got to be a way around this, because what I hadn't done, the Ultra Lead was done first before the Deliverance, and what I didn't do was I didn't tell them that we were going to do an EQ on a module. It was just whatever you're going to do. Alpha pots don't suck. Sorry, they're really good. They're probably one of the best quality ones out there. Sorry to be. I'm not poking at you, Ken. I just want to set the record straight.
Oh, come on, pot fight. Let's do it.
No. I just respectfully 100% disagree. Thanks. Anyway, I didn't want to tell them. They understood. They said, "We don't care what you're going to do. Just give us a couple modules. We know they're going to," he said, "We know they're going to be great. We know that they're going to be something different. We don't know what you're going to do. Just you have carte blanche, go do it." And I went, "Okay, open the floodgates, but I need these different pots." And they were like, "Yeah, we'll do it with the pots that we use." And I went, "Okay, I can't tell them that I'm doing the EQ. I already was formulating it, but I can't tell them because that'll blow the surprise. But I have to have
You had to make it a surprise.
I have to have the the ability to do what I think is possible, you know, and a mechanical thing like that is just a simple, stupid ass, you know, turd in the road that nobody needs, right? So, what are my choices? Argue with them or what I did do? Here's what I did. I went ahead and went to our pot supplier. Sorry, Ken, it was Taiwan Alpha that I went to. And again, I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying. I don't know where you got that impression, but
well, raise your glass to Ken. Cheers. I don't have a glass, so
Ken, I do appreciate your input and the opportunity to respond, you know, intelligently, hopefully, about a comment. I went to our pot supplier and I had them send me samples of all the pots. That I would need for the project. So there's X number of pots of X number of values. So I have them make me samples enough to make 6 sets of modules.
okay.
And then we put together the prototypes and we made it with the graphic and completed it and did all of that. And then we did the artwork showing the way we conceptualize how the graphics should look and all of that. They had, you know, the dialogue pots with middle, bass, instead of saying middle, bass, and treble, they had M, B, and T, and I did not like that. It's just like that's saying we don't really. They were sort of in that. They were in that that paradigm of we have a limited space and we have all these constraints, and I'm like going, okay, we need to erase those constraints so that we can speak English and accomplish something technologically and deliver the goods, right? So I'm not going to let a stupid pot get in the way of that, right? So that's what we did, and that allowed us to complete the design, get it the way we wanted it, jam all kinds of parts inside on the front panel board and inside more than usual, and have a nice graphic representation on the front that was different than anything else that they had. So once I had that whole platform together and I gave it to them and they flipped out and they put them in the marketplace and they sold very well. And then they came and said, okay, we got another project that you have the option of participating in or not participating in, and that project is going to be, you know, the Mark II. We've been to Mesa, we've had the discussions, they've declined to participate, respectfully declined to participate. They were in another space. And they just couldn't see that was going to be. They had the same conversation with Marshall. They couldn't see how it was going to be beneficial to them to participate in that program, and so they passed. Fine, whatever you want to do, fine, but it's not going to be a licensed Mesa product. Fine, great. So when they came to me, they said, "What?" What do you think about this project? And I said, okay, so we talked about We talked about the manufacturer's involvement and their decision not to be involved, and we talked about how it was going to be presented to the end user. And I said, okay, we're entering into sensitive territory here now because there are a lot of Mesa amps out there. There are a lot of diehard Mesa fans, the faithful, the true believers, the guys that live and die for this stuff, the guy that knows everything about how they operate. The first questions they're going to have is, what's Mesa's take on it? Is it going to be as good as anything? What is your credibility in terms of being the guy that is doing this project? And on and on and on and on. And I knew that we would need to address all of those issues head on.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like if there's anybody that's more qualified to do that out there than me, I don't know of them, because of the fact that I was at Valley Arts at the time that whole gestation process occurred. So
Yeah.
I was able to see it in real time. And as I don't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I remember what I was doing in 1979, 80, 81, 82 when the whole Mark II thing was coming out,
Yeah.
and what kind of things were being discussed and how things were being addressed and how problems were being solved and what their focus on in getting the thing right was all about, and their thoughts on it. And a lot of it was driven by the feedback that they were given by the people that were playing them and wanted to play them more and wanted them to work better and wanted them to work differently, just like we as a manufacturer get that kind of feedback from players all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had that in my quiver, and I thought, okay, I can bring that to the table. And our representation should not be that we're copying somebody else's intellectual property and taking it for profit. The presentation should be that I have a high level of respect for Randall Smith, and I was supposed to get a photograph of it so you could see
I
a
was just
picture.
thinking that 5 minutes ago.
It's on my Facebook page someplace. You can find it. But I've got photos of me hanging out with Randall Smith. We were friends. And over the years, we've talked about lots of things, but we've always been able to we've always been able to communicate and shoot the shit back and forth. And I've said things that pissed him off, and he told me, and he said things that pissed me off, and I told him. And we've always come to an understanding about what we like and don't like, and what we think positively or negatively about this issue or that issue, and blah 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 blah. We've had plenty of conversations. So my attitude was, I'm not going to diss the guy, and I'm not going to do anything disrespectful. He helped me. His company helped nurture my development in all of this, and I learned from that. And if they weren't going to be involved, the very least that Synergy could do was do an accurate, faithful representation of that thing that people are asking for like crazy. I mean, the amount of people requesting a module like that from Synergy is out of this world. People are pounding on them all the time. And so for me, it was just like, okay, there's a demand there. People want it. They're expecting of it. We've made some really, they have made some exemplary modules from other manufacturers, and the Deliverance and Ultralead modules have performed in an exemplary way as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to make sure that whatever comes out that proposes to represent what that particular amp represented to people has to be accurate. And the only way that I felt comfortable about doing that was to acknowledge the what was bestowed upon me by those guys
Yeah,
at the time that it was going on, So,
that's
and
really why you wanted to do it.
that's really why I wanted to do it.
That's
I mean,
really
that's good. Oh yeah, well, this is your tribute to Randall Smith, and yet you're making a profit off of it. Well, come on. first of all, they didn't want to play ball. Fine. And second of all, yeah, I make a royalty off of having produced the module design for them. It isn't even enough money to make it like it's not like some cash windfall or something. It's just like, as an engineer, as a consultant for any company, they pay you a certain amount of money to help them, refine, deliver, build, envision a product design, just like the synergy stuff was. So in that respect, yeah, what am I getting paid to do? I'm getting paid to do the best effing job, with all due respect to one of my mentors, that I can possibly do, so that when people hear it and finally get what they say they're asking for and put it in there, the very least is they can expect is a respectful, um, expression, a respectful effort at doing it as best as I can humanly imagine to do it. And so that's that. And then they went on the big blitz, and exactly what I expected to happen did happen. There was people that had no there's a lot of this, and then
Breaks
all
down
the
in
guys
percentages, doesn't it? It breaks
all
down.
the guys that are really all the guys that are the faithful, we call the faithful, Mesa Boogie calls them the faithful. The, all those guys, they needed to be convinced. And a lot of the YouTuber
And
guys
rightly so.
were rightly so.
Right?
And the YouTuber guys, a lot of them had never played the amp. They're younger guys.
Have the
They
original.
never experienced it. They weren't there. They didn't even know what the trick was. And some of those videos just failed miserably. I mean, they're so bad. They're not bad because the guys are bad players. They're bad because you have to, in exploring the potential of something like that, you have to really be dogged in your effort to drag the sound out of it that you're trying to achieve. You have to really work at it. You have to learn the mojo of it. And that's exactly the way the original amps were.
That's what I was going to say.
The people that learned those amps and got great sounds out of them, and you ask them, how did you get that sound out of a Mark II C+? You must have just like flicked a couple of switches and oh, no. I beat my head against the wall over that thing for 2 years before I finally got it to sing.
Yeah, they're a little bit of a riddle.
And that's what makes it attractive.
And
the people that figured it out, the people that grokked it, the people that like got magic out of it, worked their asses off to get it. And there's still things. I'll tell you, one of the guys that did not make it sound anything like a Mark II, but did a great job on the video, was the Arabia dude. Of all the guys that did the synergy modules, the Arabia with the afro, the British guy, really excellent player, really knows how to get good sounds recorded on tracks and stuff like that. And he's conversant with a lot of gear, but he was wholly unfamiliar with the whole Mark II mystique and had no idea that there was a trick or any of this. And I even made a video that's actually going to come out probably, I don't know, Monday. The video that we discussed that had the glitch in it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I did a video for those guys to explain how it operates and what the pitfalls are on it and how you need to approach it in order to get blah, 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 blah. And, yeah, thank you, Rebia Masad. Thanks, Kelly. But the beautiful thing of it is he approached it from a completely different angle and made some really beautiful music with it. He just did a beautiful thing with it. It's not what you think of when you hear a 2C+, but
that's all right.
He didn't understand. Yeah, you're right. He didn't understand the whole bass thing. But I mean, if you listen to it, if you disconnect that he's trying to play through that module, if you disconnect that paradigm from that he's trying to make something musical and does some very interesting, really beautiful stuff with it, then to me, that like makes it even more contemporary because it shows you an aspect to it that you never would have thought to try yourself.
Mm.
So in that respect, I thought he did a really good thing. But of all the people that the guy Leon Todd did a really nice job of it. A guy very familiar with the Mark series stuff. Michael Nielsen did a great job, although he was more focused on what the legends that had the amp, this kind of sounds they got, not necessarily how they got them. So his approach is a little different.
Too.
It didn't really start getting into uh does it really sound like a Mark II C plus until somebody being Ola went, okay, let's just see about that, shall we? Here's a Mark II C plus, and here's the module, and like, oh my god, nailed it. I'm not happy about how touchy the EQ is to operate, but he was the first guy to come and like go just sort of erase all that controversy about whether or not it really will sound like a 2C plus. So that was a blast watching that. And the nice thing about his video is he's not apologizing for anything. He's saying exactly what he wants to say about it, and he's picking it apart, but he's being brutally honest and he's being right. He's being
Mm.
correct. And I couldn't find a thing that he said about it to really um, complain about what he said. He said
Mhm.
that the EQ was kind of sensitive when you said blah blah blah. But what he was actually doing was setting it up in an A/B situation with an actual head, using the method of taking a Sin 1 and adding a channel to the Mark II. So he was actually doing it right in one way, but in another way, it was requiring that you turn off the EQ on the Mark amp and turn on the EQ on the module, and then in that environment, the EQ on the module actually is more efficient and has a broader range than the EQ in the amp.
That's
And he
interesting.
interpreted that as being too sensitive. Well, it's sensitive. Yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
this all goes back. What was I talking about? I was talking
It's
about the
also
people that
smaller. It's a lot smaller. I mean,
I was talking about people who are hung up on the position of the knob, so that the guys that were doing the AB of between the module and the version of whatever mark they had, well, the treble is right here, so I got on the module, I gotta set the treble right there too. Well, no, not necessarily. So going back to the conversation about the tolerance of pots, that's gonna play that's gonna play a role in how accurate you can set the settings. So if you try to set them identical, chances are your results are not going to be identical. Can you dial it in to get it so close that in a blind test you could fool people?
yeah,
Sure,
you
but you
dial it
got to
in.
like get unstuck from that. The knobs got to
But the
be
other thing is the 2CP is a module versus an entire amplifier. So there have to be uh, subtle differences between the two. I mean, it's not the same.
It's not the thing, but I endeavor to make it as brutally
Oh,
close as
I know you
possible
did,
so that
but you
if you
didn't put
had
a section in there.
oh yeah, and by the way, it's just the preamp section, it's not
Yeah,
all the
that's what
rest
I'm
of the stuff.
saying.
But there's
Yeah.
a lot of crazy stuff going inside that amp that probably in uh, get in the way of getting the amp to perform its absolute best as possible. It's like the when you go down when you when you're the bad guy and you got to go down a row of guys on each side that are all whipping you in the back with a belt.
Oh, yeah, that happens all the time.
Yeah, that's what getting a Mark II C plus to slay is like. It's like it's like it's like the expression of the Mark II C plus is that it's actively hazing you all the way.
Oh, that's funny.
And
Now,
if you come out on top of it, you've achieved a rite of passage. That's just like the thing
now
about it.
you weren't just going off of schematics and your memory. You actually brought in, didn't you have Brad Gillis's Holy Grail?
We had 4 different Mark amps.
Holy crap, man.
We had Brad Gillis's Mark IIc Plus, which is actually a plus plus. We had a friend
That's
of
always
mine's
the one
Mark
that I
IIc.
heard about.
We had a friend of mine's Mark IIc Plus. We had another friend of mine's JP2C, and then there was, I forget what the other one was. It was one that we ended up not paying too much attention to because it just wasn't a very good one. The Brad Gillis one was the best sounding one, and it had the plus plus mods. So we built it out as a 2C plus, and then we incorporated the plus plus mods in the module to make it sound just like Brad's. And then we went, there's things about the plus that are better than the plus plus, and there are things about the plus plus that are better than the plus. And so I took the things that I thought was better about the plus plus, which actually had more to do with the clean channel than the overdrive channel, and incorporated those. And the overdrive and the plus actually sounded a little bit better to me than the plus plus. The plus plus had more gain, but the plus had a little bit more harmonic subtlety. So that's what I went with. And then to get in between those two dynamics, I added the presence control so you could sort of
because I was
dial
going
it
to say
forward or back.
the gain thing is stacked on top of the clean. So if you're doing the plus plus thing on the clean, that's going to influence the gain, right?
Not so much, no, because it's a one channel amp with
That's what I
a
mean.
tube overdrive pedal dropped into the circuit somewhere.
Right. So it's the tube overdrive circuit is being dropped on top of the plus plus clean ish, right?
Yeah, but when it's away from when it's off, it's completely out of the circuit. And when it's on, it's bypassing the clean. So the things that were there's
Okay. Now I get it.
and it's much more involved than that. It's not just
Sure.
bypassing the whole clean channel. It's bypassing the part of the clean channel where the overdrive channel and the clean channel mix together to go to the next stage, and they don't actually mix together. What actually happens is the overdrive swamps out. It doesn't turn the clean channel off and the overdrive channel on. It drops the overdrive channel on top of the clean signal path so that there's so much signal going out of the overdrive stage, it swamps out the signal level that comes out of the clean stage. It just bullies its way. You don't hear the clean channel. If the clean channel is still operating, you don't hear it because there's so much hot signal level coming out of the overdrive. It swamps out anything coming out of the clean channel.
Wow.
It's a lot more involved than that. Let's not make new rumors about it, please.
Forget everything you just said in the last 45 seconds.
Yeah. And the JP2C, the difference with that is they use different switching devices than the earlier amps, and also, but it's still the same amp. It's a clean amp with an overdrive stage and the 2C, the JP2C. The difference is it's got more relays switching more pots on the front panel to activate functions on those same two clean and overdrive circuits. The clean and overdrive didn't really change hardly at all. The only thing that changes how many knobs and switches that they behind the panel, behind the scenes, they switch on and off to get that circuit to do those things. That's the whole thing about the Mark thing is it's like getting those two basic circuits to just jump through flaming hoops. And and I got to hand it to Randall Smith and the team. Nobody did or would think to spend that much effort getting that rudimentary of a circuit to do that many crazy things in one amplifier. It's insane. When you look inside, it's just like
versions. And then the flanker versions.
And for me, how that evolved into our amplifiers is that I just went, I'm not married to that. See,
I'm not doing it that way.
They've got. I'm not doing it that way. But see, there was a personality in that.
Hell no.
I
Sure.
wasn't looking for that personality. I was looking to go, I don't really want that much mid focus. I want
Mhm.
a bigger, broader, open palette. That's what I was used to. Garang, gawoom. So I'm looking at that going, yeah, that's great, but what would really work better? And I have the luxury of starting from a clean slate because nobody knows who the hell I am. I get to do I get to start with a complete, clean, fresh slate.
Yeah.
But I have everything that they went through in developing that in my quiver so that I don't have to do that. I learned that from them. I don't have to go relearn it from scratch. I
Mhm.
could go from that point to, hey, what really would work better was three separate, entirely distinct channels. It requires a couple more tubes. It requires some more development in the switching circuitry. It requires a power amp that has a wider range of harmonic ability in the lows and the mids and the highs in order to do justice to all three of those channel topologies and so on and so on and so on. Uh, so yeah, I mean isn't that what progress is? Innovating,
Right.
taking the ball
The other
and
thing
running with it.
too
Yeah.
is,
So
Randy wouldn't have wanted to change that because, as convoluted as it was, that's what gave it that sound, and people were playing the shit out of those amps. That was
and
the
imagine my surprise when I did it exactly the way I thought that it should have been done. That if I was working for Mesa, I would have said, this is what we need to do. This is what I know about the platform. See, in order for Mesa to have participated in that and done an outstanding job of coming up with their own module, they would have had to take the platform, the Sin 1 and the Sin 2, and wrap their head around everything about its behavior. That means they have to learn somebody else's technology and figure out how to make their stuff work within that, which is something that I'm sure, absolutely sure, that is the farthest thing from where they want to go to. They don't want to concede their engineering expertise and excellence to anybody else, and that would be why I think they wouldn't want to participate. It wasn't about, oh, how much money we're going to make, blah blah blah. I think in Randy's heart of hearts, it was like, in order for me to do this, in order for us to do that, we're going to have to concede our expertise, our reputation to some other company that we don't think is as expert as we are.
right, right.
And that's totally legitimate.
Mhm.
Why wouldn't I think that about us? I had the luxury of designing the Sin 1 and Sin 2. So to me, it was like I was involved in the design project from the very beginning, and that is perfectly consistent with my philosophy about design. And I didn't have to wrap my head around somebody else's interpretation of how things should work. This is how I think things should work. So
Right.
it was really natural for me to design our modules to work within that. In fact, actually make them excel over other modules, because the other modules, some of them were laid out by Bruce, some of them were laid out by uh, Peter, who was working there at the time, no longer is, and other people who were in conference back and forth between the manufacturers who weren't actually laying out their own boards. They were telling other guys how to do the layouts and what they expected the outcome to be, and getting samples to approve and back. I didn't have to do all that because I had all of those three steps: the execution of it, the approval of it, and the feedback that's required to get the
All your
whoever's
fingers were in the
all
pie.
of that into all of that design effort. What part is important? What part isn't important? All of that
Uh-huh.
I already had in one little box already, so I
Yeah.
didn't have to have three other cooks involved in that process.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't blame the Mesa guys one little bit for wanting to be in the position of going, if we do this, we have to admit that you have something that we don't have. And I, I would totally sympathize with that if I was in their position. I'd probably be the same way. Um, let's help out a couple of cats here just for
Yeah.
fun. Um, Hey Brandon, I'd like to do that on a different show. That's a pretty big slice of conversation. And I already talk way too freaking much. And 7, 8, 9. We're already in 2 hours. Holy crap! We haven't even scratched the surface yet. We'll get to
guys, we'll do another question answering episode because there's a lot of questions here that we're not getting to tonight.
Let's see. There was one here. JJ's house of jams, crackling sound, and popped in turtle fuse. That means a power tube went bad. It's not a 6.25 milliamp fuse. It's a 6.25 million. It's a six. No, it's a 630 milliamp fuse. 0.625 amp. In the PS2. It's a 0.625 milliamp fuse you want in there, and that means that one of the power tubes had gone bad. You heard it should be replaced with a 2 amp. That's in the PS100. The PS100 had a 1 amp fuse that needed to be changed to a 2 amp fuse. And the 12DW7 is also a feature of the PS100, not the PS2. So you're mixing the PS2 and the PS100 together. Put in a new a new 630 milliamp fuse and a new pair of power tubes. You don't have to buy us anything. You're on your way. You're good to go.
Here, look. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Half of it. I played on the first half. Interesting story. Okay, I'll make it short. I wasn't officially. Well, if you were like me and prepared.
Me? Prepared?
You can have water. You can have coffee. You can have a shot of Fortinzan, and you could have a margarita all in one shot. See, that's the kind of dedication I put into this show, and you need to get up to speed, pal. I'm telling you. Just that I love you, and I'm kidding.
You're giving me crap, and I wasn't even in the room.
I totally roasted you and dragged your face on the concrete.
Nice.
You're welcome, JJ's. Thanks for the question. I was never officially in the band. I was hired to go record half the album. The record company was debating whether or not they were going to release an album of this band. They had a producer that believed in the band. He believed he could make a good record with them. He and I had a contentious relationship. It turned out fine. It turned out to be a lot of fun. But they didn't have the budget to do a whole record. The record company said, we'll front half an album. And if we like that, we'll front the second half, and then you can go finish it and release it. So I participated in the first half of the album and worked with the material that they already had. And they submitted it to the label. We went and did a showcase. They were like, okay, we think you've got something, but you still don't have a hit song. We need a hit song. So they went out to outside writers. It was the singer from Detective. What was his name? Anyway, they got an outside writing team to submit a couple of songs, and they liked one of them. They used actually two of them, but they started out liking the first one, which was Obsession. So they got Obsession, and they went back in and they cut that, and they called me to come back in and cut the second half of the album. I was already in New York touring with the Dickies and having a ball. Being in New York the first time, being on the East Coast for the first time, going in and out of strange clubs all up and down the East Coast. It was just like, this is what I needed right now. I was burned out on LA. This is like, get the hell out of town. And that band, whatever you think of punk rock or the Dickies version of it, their particular goofball flavor of it, whatever you think of them, every gig sold out, line around the block. It was mayhem every show, and it was a blast. And I wasn't going to give that up to come back to LA and play some more songs on a record for maybe a wishy-washy kind of a label.
Hey, can you turn your amp down?
No, they weren't doing that. was Michael DeBar's played. Michael DeBar's and I forget who his writing team. I forget her name. Holly Knight. Michael DeBar's and Holly Knight wrote Obsession. They submitted to a few bands. Animotion did it with the producer Paul Ryan, who was a whack job. He was all business. I wasn't. We butted heads, and then we became buddies over stupid stuff. But we became buddies, and they submitted that to the label. The label went, great, finish it. And then Holly Knight submitted another song, I Engineer, which was their second single. So they weren't a one-hit wonder band, actually. And I loved those guys. They were such sweethearts. We're still tight friends. And especially Bill, the lead singer, who I was friends with before he got involved with them. So we were buddy all the way back to 1979. And but at the time, it was just like, you know what? I'm sorry. It may work out great. It may be fun to be a synth pop band, pop star for a minute, but it just wasn't me at the time. I did everything I could to sabotage my involvement in that, to so that they would hate me and like kick me out, and they wouldn't kick me out. So I finally went, I can't come back and finish the record. I'm playing CBGBs tomorrow night with a band where two of the guys are junkies, and they don't give a shit about the band. They don't give a shit about the music. They don't give a shit about the audience. They only give a shit about getting paid and getting to the Doan Clinic on time. But I'm having a fucking blast because I'm playing at CB's, and people are like lined up around the block to hear this. And I was just like enthralled with it until I wasn't.
That's how it goes.
That's the way it was. And they went out and they were huge for a short time. And so they had a nice success out of it, and they kept it up, and they're still doing they're doing the Where Are They Now shows and tours and stuff like that, and it's great. So when they came to town, they have several different guitar players in different parts of the country. When they need to go play someplace, they just call somebody. And Bill called me up and he says, what are you doing Friday? He lives in Oregon, and he's like, what do you do? And I said, I don't know, what's up? And he goes, well, I'm going to be in town. Oh, great. You want to come over and hang out? You want to have dinner together? Blah, 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 blah. He says, well, actually, I'm going to play a little gig. You wouldn't be like interested in getting together and playing a little of your cool bluesy stuff that you do. And I'm like, no, I'm fine. What do you got? He says, well, we're going to be playing on Friday. Would you be available? And I'm like, yeah, I think I could probably carve out a Friday. And I said, what's up? He says, well, we're playing Friday. Great. What's the venue? The Greek Theater. I'm like, okay, Bill, what is up? And it was like, okay, here's what's going on. It's the blah 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 blah. The Back to the '80s show. It's a compilation of all these '80s
Bring
bands.
the sparkly jacket.
Yeah. And I just went like, yes, I'm in. I think I can carve out a Friday night for the Greek Theater, which is on my bucket list, by the way, and no longer is. Thank you very much. What a blast that was! So that was great, and we had a hugely fun time.
Yeah, good thing you don't have to play that place anymore. Jeez.
Yeah.
So, do you want to keep hitting these questions, or you want to talk about impedance mismatch?
Let's touch on the impedance thing a little bit because
it's 9:00.
7, 8, 9. Jesus, what happened? Maybe, Scott, you missed a lot of fucking hot air.
That's what the show's about.
Jeez, you missed me not being on my second margarita by now. We had planned on talking about impedance a little bit. A few of you commented about how the YouTuber guys didn't really rock the Mark II module, set it up wrong, didn't do the turn the bass down, the V on the EQ right, and all that. Mm-hmm. Another video will come out on the beginning of the week that is the video that I did to explain to those guys how it works, what its tricks are, and some additional things that the people out there that are in the know, you guys, some of you guys are here that are in the know about this stuff, are going to be paying attention to and are going to be critical of if you don't do it. This and this and this and this with the EQ and blah blah blah, and watch the bass and da 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 da. And I go through it step by step. It's a 15-minute long video, and I'm sure they just went because only one guy actually talked about this one particular thing I pointed out, and that was Leon Todd about the impedance mismatching thing. In the original Mark II C Plus, it only had 8 ohm outputs. Mark III, same thing. Several Mark amps only have, most Mesas, the rectifiers, all of them, they only have 4 and 8 ohm outputs. Even the ones that say 16 ohms on the jack on the back, they are connected to the 8 ohm winding on the secondary of the output transformer.
Whoa!
They had no intention of conceding to the 16 ohm crowd. It was like, we got a output transformer that's got a 4 ohm and 8 ohm tap, and if you run the 8 ohm output into a 16 ohm cab, who gives a rat's ass? You're not going to blow our output transformers because they're built well enough that they're going to be able to handle that. So screw it. And go look at their schematics online for any of those amps, and you'll see that any of the amp models that say 16 ohm, the 16 ohm jack and the 8 ohm jack are wired in parallel because they're wired to the 8 ohm tap. Sorry. What that means, though, is that when you do plug it into a 16 ohm cab, the mid-range becomes elevated and the top end flattens out a little bit. And there's a distinctive Mesa character in that mid-range quality and that roundness on the top end that is caused by mismatching the impedance. Nobody ever says, I'm going to blow my amp doing that, because Mesa labeled an 8 ohm jack 16 so that you wouldn't freak out about it. That's all. It's just psychological gameplay. Talk about the name of the name of today's show, modules and mismatch and mind games. That's the mind game. They didn't give you the ammunition you need to have fear about mismatching the amp. So you didn't. You just plugged it in because they said it was okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, you got this mid-range characteristic out of it that complements the sound of the preamp stage in a certain way that brings out that enhanced sort of low mid thing. That when you're plugging it into a Mesa cab, it sounds one way. When you're plugging it in, which is a Mesa 412 cab, the Mark style 412 cab with the diamond grill front and the front loaded speakers, that was an 8 ohm 412 cab. A 16 ohm Marshall cab behaves entirely different, and it changes that mid-range character.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the doobie is not going to be. I don't think she should make appearance tonight, and I know that's. I agree with you, Scott. That's really all that matters. But
I know.
We may have to.
Me three.
That may change. We may be able to drag her out since we had a specific request, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, that mid-range character, I explained that in this explainer video that would be really important to try that. And I demonstrated it so that you could actually hear how it worked. And the only guy that listened to the video far enough to pick up on that and try it in the video was Leon Todd. Nobody else did that. And that's just the way this stuff goes. So we're going to have a video out where you will see me explaining that to them, that they didn't do it, that you can do it yourself, and you will try it and you'll go, oh yeah, that actually works. So that's the story behind that. And the whole thing about impedance and mismatching and blowing output transformers and all of that stuff, they aren't things that exist in isolation. One thing works in conjunction with another thing that works in under the circumstances created by another thing that determine if you're going to blow an output transformer. And what are those things? If you don't have a load on your amp when you turn it on, if you don't have the speaker plugged in to the back of the amp. Some amplifiers have a jack that shorts to ground when it's not plugged in. That represents a load on the output transformer. It's a 0 ohm load, but it's a load.
Mhm.
And it's actually an okay load up to a certain point. Past that point, the transformer can be driven to heat up hot
Mhm.
enough to finally fail. You have to work really hard to get it to do that. Who works really hard to get it to do that? Almost nobody. Because what's the first thing that happens when you play through your amp and no sound comes out of it? You
You
start looking
stop.
around to see if it's plugged in. Yeah. And if it's not plugged in, you go, oh.
Who
But
does
somebody
that?
will
I
go
can't
on the
hear
Gear page
anything.
and go,
Let me play
I
for 15
turned
minutes.
on my amp, but I didn't plug in the speaker. Is it blown? No. It isn't blown until you've blown it. And boy, will you know when you blew it. A fuse will blow. It won't work with the speaker cabinet anymore when you connect it. All kinds of things will happen. So, no. Next thing, impedance mismatch. The impedance is a complex set of circumstances. It's not just ohms. It's not DC ohms. It's not 8 or 16. It's all frequency dependent stuff. Different things happen at different frequencies along the whole spectrum of a guitar amp, which is typically about 50 hertz to 5,000. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
Uh, if you plug an 8 ohm amp into a 16 ohm cab, it's less of a load. If you abuse the crap out of your amp for hours at that mismatch, and maybe a tube arcs in the process, you may or may not damage the output transformer. Again, you have to work at it. You have to work at it. Third circumstance, Mark, thanks. Mark Hamstra. Exactly. You may have a pre-conditioned disaster on your hands. Another person that I'd seen recently implied that over time, abusing an output transformer may leave a fingerprint in there, will predispose that output transformer to being damaged later. That's really unlikely. The only time that happens is if you have a little pinhole between two windings that are beside each other, literally a pinhole that you would have to have a microscope to see it. A pinhole in the insulation. Copper wire has varnish insulation around it. So when two copper wires are laying side by side and a signal arcs between them because one wire is on the primary and the other wire is on the secondary, and they talk to each other through a little pinhole, you would not be able to see it unless you had a microscope. But it would develop a little copper trace or a carbon trace that would be enough of a connection between those two wires to blow a DC fuse.
Hmm.
That transformer is dead. It will still work even up to a certain point. Even it would play clean, but when you got up to a certain volume level, it would make a sound.
Huh.
And if you do that enough times, it'll finally seal that transformer's fate. But that's really rare too. Most often what happens is it's just bad tubes, really. And so predisposing an output transformer to failure takes a lot of work. And it doesn't necessarily happen only with an attenuator, not with a speaker cabinet. It happens with either one. Why? Because most attenuators, especially attenuators these days, are reactive loads, which behave like what? A speaker.
Speaker.
So if you're playing through a speaker cabinet with your amp fully dimed for 2 or 3 hours and it's a vintage amp and you finally get it hot enough to make the output transformer break down, that would have happened whether it was in a speaker cabinet or an attenuator.
Right.
And that's why people sort of assign that failure mode to
It's
an
the
attenuator.
attenuator's fault.
We assign that failure to the attenuator because we never experienced it with a speaker cabinet. Why? Because it was too effing loud to
Yeah,
experience with
you
a
were never
speaker
going to
cabinet.
turn it up like that.
You were never going to turn it up that loud.
Yeah.
Now that you can predispose the amplifier to
Yeah.
failure. But it takes work to do it. The
Yeah.
one And we talked about this last show where somebody said, "Oh yeah," somebody said that the boss was has got a badly designed load and it's dangerous to blend, and so manufacturers aren't going to warranty their output transformers if you use it with that device. Uh, I take issue with that position, and the issue that I take with that position is that again, it tries to assign a failure mode to a product without necessarily understanding how these things interact and work together to cause that failure mode. We say failure mode because it isn't like this unexpected catastrophic freak out. It's something that you can measure and predict and pretty much lay out what it would take to get it to do that, and you can demonstrate that over a particular amount of time, if you measure the transformer temperature and the load and the power output into that load and measure the impedance while you're doing it, you can almost calculate when it's going to fail.
Huh.
And it will probably do that pretty accurately within 20% of whatever calculation you came up with, if you are able to come up with that formula to track it.
Okay.
And it's not difficult to do. It's just math. So you have to know how those things work together in order to understand how they will interact in such a way to cause said failure. And it's really, really, really rare. And it is why we will not go on record saying that we won't warranty our amplifiers against our output transformers against using it with a Waza and maybe one or two other, like the Rivera uh, or the Power Station, a few other known quantity, quality build, well made, properly matched in terms of power output handling. I mean, if you put an ultra lead and dime it into a 50-watt uh, attenuator, some inexpensive low powered attenuator, and you blow that attenuator, and then it's got an open load, and then you blow the output transformer, that could happen, and we won't warranty that. But in a bona fide quality design reactive load that can handle the power, you won't blow our output transformer in it. And if you do, I'll probably buy you a drink, because then I'll know that you actually put in the effort, and it takes an effort.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Come on down. Bring your amp down. Let's talk about what exactly happened, because that would be an opportunity for us to explain and demonstrate what happened. We used to do this with stuff that like if somebody had an amp fall out of the back of their truck during a tour, and they would go, "Hey, all we did was put tubes back in it, and it worked, and it got us through the gig. Amazing! We didn't even think that was possible." We'd say, "Send us the amp so we could photograph it," and we would take a picture of it and do a Facebook post going, "This amp rolled 60 miles an hour off of the side of a road and ended up in the weeds, and all they did was put tubes in it." We did that with a 292 power amp. Here's a 292 that was in a building that caught on fire. We rebuilt it with all the original pots. All we did was put fresh tubes in it and clean it up. It still works. We did that with Chicago. Their 292 power amp that was involved in that flood in the 90s, the late 90s in Nashville, ended up on the bottom of a river for 2 weeks. And they sent it to us, and we cleaned it up and rebuilt it. And we did a little movie about that. I love that when that happens, because that gives us a platform to say, "Hey, look, this is the reality of what goes on with this kind of stuff." So I'm not. Our position on the TAE thing was just like, whatever you've heard about the integrity of the load in that thing negatively, that it's the frequency at 20 hertz, the impedance, blah blah blah. It's gonna. We're officially not signing on to that argument, and I proved it.
Okay.
We proved it in our design department. We put it through some paces. We took a Sound City amp and ran it at 150 watts, 100-watt amp. We ran it at 50 hertz at 150 watts into a Waza tube amp expander for an hour. And the Waza maximum load capacity is 150 watts also.
Okay.
And we measured the output impedance under load at that 150 watt square wave, which is much more dangerous for a load than a sine wave, and measured everything. And exactly what I predicted in the last show would happen did happen, which is somebody had published, and I don't even know if this is a legitimate curve, but somebody had published online what they claim to be is a graphic representation of the Waza load, this bathtub shaped, that the low frequencies rise just like a normal reactive load rises at low frequencies, but doesn't drop off after 50 hertz and goes down to zero like an actual speaker does. It continues to rise as the frequency is going down, 40 hertz, 30 hertz, 20 hertz. It's still rising. So
Okay.
that you see on this graph that at 20 hertz, the effective impedance, not DC resistance, impedance is 200 ohms. And so people look at that and they go, oh, it's proven that it's a 200 ohm load, which is no good for my amp. It's going to blow. Mm-mm, 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 mm-mm. The effective impedance at that frequency may be 200 ohms, but the actual DC resistance in combination with the operating impedance and the frequency roll-off point of the amplifier come into play to prevent that from happening. And you don't see that on the graph because it wasn't measured that way on a graph. But if you plug the output transformer, and if you take a DC measurement, this is what some guys did. They plugged a jack into they plugged a foam plug into the amp input of the Waza with a DC voltmeter and measured it at the 16 ohm switch setting
Yeah.
with all the voicing switches cranked, and measured 200 DC ohms
Okay.
on it and said, that's 200 ohms. That won't work. But the thing is, the secondary output transformer, the secondary of the output transformer in your amp, the 16 ohm secondary, if you put a meter on it, it doesn't measure 16 ohms. It measures less than 1 ohm of DC resistance.
Oh, wow.
Oh, so what happens when you put two resistors in parallel? Okay, if you put two resistors in parallel, like 8 ohms, you get 4 ohms.
Right.
If you put two 16 ohm resistors in parallel, you get 8 ohms. There is a calculation, and those are similar impedance. That's a calculation for similar impedances or similar resistances, similar DC resistances. So if R1 and R2 are the same value, then putting them in parallel, the result is half that value.
Right.
There's a different equation for dissimilar DC resistances. And in this case, the dissimilar resistances are 200 in parallel with 0.1. So you can do the calculation, but I'll simplify it for you. The result of that calculation is going to be closer to 0.1 than it's going to be to 200 because the 0.1 is so low, it swaps out the 200 DC ohm number. It's going to still, it's basically going to still read 0.1 ohms. And that is the DC resistance that's on the amp in of the TAE when you plug your amp into it. And that's why its reactive load is not actually running at 200 DC ohms when you plug your amp into it. And the other reason that it's not going to put out 200 hertz at 200 ohms is because your amp is not going to produce 220 hertz. It's not going to produce 20 hertz. Your amplifier is going to start rolling off at 100, and the output is actually going to decrease as the frequency goes down. So, for example, let's just say your amplifier will produce 150 watts at full clipping at 50 hertz, just like is shown on the graph, where there's a big rise in the impedance at 50 hertz and then it falls off. on that impedance graph of that speaker at 50 hertz, you jam a ton of signal into the power amp of your 100-watt amp, it will put out 150 watts. It'll be so distorted, it's a square wave. But it'll put out 150 watts at 50 hertz. And then as you go down from 50 hertz to 40 to 30 to 20 to 0, it will drop off. So by the time you get down to 20 hertz, that 150-watt figure will drop down to about 20 watts, roughly.
Wow.
Because of the combination of your amp rolling off and the effective impedance of the load input going up. What happens in Ohm's law? When the resistance goes up, the current goes down. So that means your amplifier is actually working less at 20 hertz, way, way, way less, like 1/6 less than it would be. And that's why plugging your amp into that Waza job ain't going to do that. If you blew the output transformer on your amp using that product, you had a precondition,
Yeah.
that probably contributed to that.
Right.
And that's why I have no fear of anybody plugging any of our amps into that product and damaging it, because if you worked hard enough to actually do it, we'll have you on the show and talk about it.
Ooh.
We'll put our arm around your shoulder and we'll pour you a margarita and we'll pat you on the back and say it's okay, pat you on the head. We'll help you out.
Yeah.
Again, if you work hard enough at it, we got some pictures. We'll show you. If you work hard enough at it, you'll do some damage. And I told you before the previous show about. I think we should wrap up on this. One of our good customers had a 1971 JMP super bass that was modified. It's not a stock super bass. It's been modified, unmodified. It's been, molested. It's not like a pristine museum amp or anything. He beats it up, uses it all the time. Exactly, Ken. You're looking inside my head. That's not fair. He blew the output transformer in his amp using it with the Power Station 2. He worked really hard to do that. He played that amp for 4 hours.
Really hard to do it.
Full right hand sweep. Full right hand sweep. You know what full right hand sweep means. It's not just a figure of speech. He turned every knob all the way to the right and played it that way for 4 hours. And he finally overheated the output transformer enough for it to fail, a 1971 output transformer. He was bummed. We were bummed.
I'm sure that was a really great 4 hours, though.
I'm sure it was a killer 4 hours. But, he was just kind of like, I thought this wasn't supposed to happen. Well,
yeah, right.
A lot of things aren't supposed to happen, but, things happen if you try hard enough. If you work at it hard enough, you can accomplish anything that you set your mind to do.
Nuking your power transformers.
So to help him out, we took the output transformer out, and he says, well, okay, I understand. I did a bad thing. I own it. I'm okay with that. I understand. But how do I get back home? Yeah. How does Dorothy get back to Kansas? Mm-hmm. And I just said, you're a longtime good customer. We'll help you out. Don't sweat it. We took the output transformer out, sent it off to get it rewound so that you have the original iron in, and then got it back, reassembled it, put it back together, and things sounds great. Now, that's a real simplified story. A year ago, December of last year, this happened, and we sent the transformer off to get it rebuilt. Of course, transformer suppliers, like every other supplier on the planet, who originally quoted 6 weeks. Well, we got it back yesterday. That's how long it took. We literally got the transformer back yesterday.
Wow.
And and then it was Friday. I wanted to end the Friday on a high note, and when it arrived, I went, yes,
let's do it. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So it came early in the day, and we pulled out the amp, and I had carefully photographed everything before we took it apart to make sure they would all go back and looking as stock as possible. And we got it all put back together, and then called him at the end of the day and said, it's alive and it's beautiful. And he was just like so overjoyed. So that was a wonderful Friday. This was an amazing 2 weeks. We just had so much fun. We had so many challenges. We did so much fun stuff. Let's have a look inside of a formerly dead, now back to life, bitchin' 71 Super Bass. Starting with picture Marshall 1. This is what it looks like inside. This is the preamp stage. If you look over on the far left of the photograph there's a little red thing next to that blue capacitor. That's the modification that somebody did to turn the Super Bass into a Super Lead. And all the rest of it is pretty stock, except like if you look just to the right a little bit where the second group of input jacks are, above that there's a blue capacitor that should have been a mustard cap.
Okay.
Somebody had changed that to some other value and then changed it back to the stock value. So that's not a stock capacitor. Then moving over to the right.
Like the value is stock.
Yeah. And then moving to the right, stock, everything stock, until you get about 3/4 of the way to the right where you see two blue capacitors with heat shrink on the leads standing straight up. Those are bias filter capacitors that had been changed. This amp had been completely recapped.
Okay.
The filter caps and the bias caps. So that's what those are. And then stock. And then let's go to Marshall 2, photo of Marshall 2. This photo is the power section. So there's the flat laydown power transformer and the output stage, the power tubes, and all of that. So this is actually after the transformer had been reinstalled. So I made it look as impossible to tell that it had been replaced as a human could do. I used all the original wiring, the original if you look at the impedance selector at the top middle of the photo, you see the little rubber sleeves that they put over the wires to connect them to the impedance selector. I just wanted it to look as neat and as original as possible. And then let's go to picture Marshall 3. This is the way we got the transformer back. They actually sent it with a cover because when they rebuild it, they basically take the iron core, which is the steel core, which is layers and layers of steel. They take those all apart individually to retain the original iron of the transformer. And then they wind a new core for it. And that's what you're seeing here. This is, they put a cover on it because once they rebuild it, they pot it with varnish to seal all the laminations together so that they don't vibrate. So this is how we got it after we took their covers off, which aren't the original covers. We kept the original covers from the original transformer so we could put them back on the transformer and then install it so that it would be as stock as humanly possible. And that is what photograph Marshall 4 is. This is the rewound transformer with the stock covers back on it. Boom. And this is the style of transformer. If you look in the bottom left angle of the photo, this is what are called the red and the yellow, black, and green wires are called self leads. That's the actual copper winding of the secondary coming off the transformer, covered in the original uh, the braided insulation, the braided silk and varnish coated colored silk insulation coating that goes on the original wires that came. So that isn't. This is the earlier style transformer where the actual secondary leads come right off the winding and out of the transformer. Later transformers they would attach uh, PVC coated wires to the big wires inside because they're very difficult to manage. They're 14 gauge copper. It's really stiff and it's really hard to get it to lay down and it's really labor intensive to install. That's why later transformer companies stopped doing that. But this is an earlier version. It's got the self leads and we wanted it to be stock, so we did it the self leads. This thing took me, and I know what I'm doing, but it took me 3 hours to get that put back together in that super clean uh looking configuration, going back to Marshall 2 to get it to look like that inside. I was very, very careful to get it to look nice. And then what did I do? I fired it up into a PS2 and did a full right hand sleep on it just to make sure, because I know that's what he's going to do. And I need to make sure that it's going to withstand the I hate you test. So that was the beautiful ending to a lovely Friday. And
that's the ending to this show.
And that's the end of the show.
Kelly, you killed me with the touring circuit comment. That's my favorite. I say that all the time now, and even when it's not germane to anything, and people don't know what I'm talking about. But it's here. Oh man, modern vintage. You're all groovy, man. Oh, was Nico-chan getting ready to pop in?
Yeah.
Kill.
Who?
Sorry, a little bit of chaos, guys.
I don't understand what you're telling me to do.
I'm gonna play them.
On your phone? Uh-huh.
As soon as voice start.
Little domestic bliss in the Fryatt household. Let's see. While Steve was sorting that out, there was a question up here. No, Steve, you're coming back. And
special requests.
Your mic is unmuted again. What's happening over there?
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Well, by special request, Nika-chan has been prevailed upon to make an appearance. Before that, I just wanted to show you this. This is Detective. This is a picture from the 70s, and that's the guy in the middle with a leather jacket next to the guy with a white jacket.
Is that Bill?
That's Michael DeBarras. He's the guy that wrote Animotion.
Oh, actually, that makes sense.
Yeah, and to the right of him, the guy with the vest and the guy with the vest on, and right next to the guy with the leather jacket. That's my good friend, drummer John Hyde, who I still play with on occasion. So what the fuck? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Nika-chan.
That's not the Doobie song. Oh, this is a good time.
Nika-chan, we've actually had a request for you to make an appearance tonight. How are you doing?
I'm drunk as usual.
What are you drinking?
I've been drinking. Well, today I've been drinking Well, a lot of things. I usually drink a whiskey. I mean bourbon. I love a bourbon. I love a bourbon. Yeah, but also drinking a champagne today.
Champagne
Yeah.
and
Well,
bourbon.
sorry. I'm like sparkling wine.
The sampler platter.
Yeah. What? So, well, you guys having fun, I guess.
We're having a great time, but we had a special request for you to come and tell us. Maybe you could tell us something a little bit about whiskey.
Whiskey. Well,
You being the expert.
not really. I just love drinking.
Oh! Don't. Do you need me to get you a paper bag?
Sorry. Drink too much. As always. Sorry, guys.
That is definitely not iced tea in the Jack bottle. No.
Yeah. Someone mentioned Jim Beam pre pre hub pre. Sorry, I'm drunk. Jim Beam rye. Jim Beam rye something. Pre prohibition, whatever called.
Oh, pre-prohibition.
Pre-prohibition rye.
Sorry, English is not my first language.
That's okay. We understand.
And I've been
How we all sound. We've been drinking.
drinking a lot, so that Jim Beam, I have to try that Jim Beam pre.
Oh! I see what you're saying. So
Pre-prophylactic.
so whoever brought that up piqued your interest, and now you got to go. Yeah.
Because I love Jim Beam. That's really reasonable. Jim Beam tastes good, but reasonable. I go to local market and sometimes they do on sale Jim Beam, like 1.5 liter thing. Yeah, they selling really cheap. Like sometimes they selling like $15 because I have a membership thing.
Oh.
Yeah, so I can have a lots of Manhattans and stuff.
Well, Scott says everyone sounds like that after drinking Jim Beam, so no worries.
Oh yeah, that's kind of the point.
We picked up a copy of this the other day. By the way,
Of course you did.
Of course.
Buffalo Trace's legacy. So we grabbed this, and you apparently you've been reading a little bit about it.
Yeah, there was a bourbon smoke bourbon soy sauce infused margarita recipe.
Ooh.
Sounds awful, but maybe I should try it.
I think we should all try it.
Yeah, maybe.
Smoked
Sounds awful. I should try it.
smoked bourbon soy sauce
Smoked bourbon soy sauce
infused margarita
recipe.
So if anybody knows where to get smoked bourbon soy sauce, you know where to get it?
Amazon, of course.
Oh, Amazon.
And you can buy anything from Amazon.
Like what?
Like
Barf bags?
what?
Barf bags?
What's that?
It's like the like you get on an airplane when you're
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. That too. That too. Yeah. I just use
the floor.
Plastic
Yeah. that.
So it's not smoked bourbon soy sauce. It's smoked bourbon that's soy sauce infused.
Yeah. And anybody want to go there
The Bourbon Festival.
Where is that?
Ooh.
next year?
Oh, she's asking if anybody wants to go because she wants to hitchhike if you're going.
Yeah.
Ooh, what's this, Bimo? Wasabi and vodka for that real kick?
I can't do wasabi, man.
You can't do that wasabi.
No, that hurts my
Why not?
feelings.
It's just a part of the like it.
No, it's I love
It's a horseradish.
exactly. I can't do horseradish.
What, do you got something against horses?
Possibly. Horseradish, definitely. I can't do it, man.
Well,
I love eating fire. I love super hot stuff. I cannot do horseradish. It just
chicken.
Okay, Scott, now you're talking my
Everclear and
language.
espresso.
Now you're talking my language. Everclear and espresso. Yes, baby.
Oh well, I don't know anything about that.
Well, you're going to.
I'm just happy to drink bourbon. Bourbon. Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on the show. You obviously have some fans. This is like the third time somebody said, "Oh, I was talking to Mike Bagetta from
Okay.
MSSV,"
So
and he said, "Yeah, he says, oh, I've been checking out the show," and I said, "Oh, thank you." And he says, "Honestly, I just like zoom past all the bullshit, and I only care about the last few minutes when Niku-chan comes on. That's the part I live for." And I was blown away.
Thank
So,
you, Mom.
so you're actually getting a little bit of a following there,
Thank you.
and we love having you.
Thank you.
I met Mike today
Oh, did
while I
you?
was walking my dog.
Really?
I've known Mike online. I'd never met him in person. I'm walking him around Echo Park Lake, and I hear Joe Gamble. I'm like, huh? That doesn't normally happen to me. I look up and it's Mike. He's in town from Florida on the road.
Yeah, we went
That's
see him
fortunate happenstance.
the other night.
Yeah, we went and see him play. Yeah, really interesting, really interesting guitar player.
Really nice.
Yeah,
super cool guy.
Well, next time I will bring up a question to you guys, so we can talk more.
Yes, please do.
Thank you for coming on.
Sure.
Your fans appreciate it. It looks like Scott needs a T-shirt.
Thank
Cheers.
And we'll have we'll go to work on that.
Okay.
And thank you guys for hanging in there. Always a treat to have you guys on board. Joe,
Hi,
as usual.
I'm here.
We barely scratched the surface of what we were going to talk about tonight. So we're going to have some more fun. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good night,
Sounds
guys.
great.
Ciao.
Have yourself a lovely Sunday.